Hi, this is Zibby Owens, and you're listening to the award-winning podcast, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. And speaking of books, I have two of my own books coming out this spring and summer. Princess Charming is a picture book, which debuts on April 19th, and Bookends, a memoir of love, loss, and literature, comes out on July 1st, and it is truly a labor of love. I hope you'll pre-order, order, and join me on tour as I go across the country. You can find out more at zibbyowens.com or bookendsmemoir.com. And you can follow me on Instagram at zibbyowens because I always post about everything. Enjoy the show. Katy Regan is the author of How to Find Your Way Home, a novel. Katy began her writing career as a reporter on local newspapers and then moved into writing features for the Classies, becoming a features writer and then commissioning editor for Marie Claire magazine, where she also wrote the popular column And Then There Were Three, sort of about having a baby with her friend. Her first novel, One Thing Led to Another, was a fictionalized account of this experience and was published by HarperCollins in 2008. Alongside writing fiction, Katy still works as a freelance journalist and has written for most national newspapers and magazines, including Stella, Psychologies, The Daily Mail, The Times, and Grazia. She is also the author of two self-help books, Real Focus and Real Strength. She is a proud Northerner from Morecambe, Lancashire, an area that figures in many of her novels, and now lives in Hertfordshire with her son. Welcome, Katy. Thank you so much for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books to discuss How to Find Your Way Home, a novel.
Thanks for having me.
Would you mind telling listeners a bit about what the book is about? And I'm particularly interested in the homelessness angle of it and how you so seemingly realistically portrayed the experience of being a homeless person and what it's like sort of reacclimating and all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So How to Find Your Way Home is, I would call it a big emotional family drama. And it's about a brother and a sister, Stephen and Emily Nelson. And when we meet them in the present day, they've been estranged for 17 years. And we know that Emily's been looking for her brother, who she knows is homeless. And one day her sort of prayers are answered, I guess, in that he walks into the homelessness office where she works, finding flats for homeless people. And their kind of lives recollide. And then they embark on a sort of birding trip, a birding journey. And we learn all about their childhood and the kind of reasons why they were sort of estranged in the first place, like the big event that happened in their childhood that sort of catapulted them apart. And the reason I made it a brother and sister was a lot to do with the homelessness angle, in that I was really interested in this idea that, you know, if you were a brother and sister brought up in the same family with the same circumstances, what would mean one of you ends up homeless on the streets and one of you doesn't. One of you ends up sort of, you know, in a normal life, I guess. Emily's quite sort of middle class. She's got a nice apartment. She's got a boyfriend, good job. You know, what could have happened in your life to make that happen? So that's where that came from.
I love the, I didn't love, I was equally horrified by the Burberry's sweater showdown.
Oh, yes. 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 Who says things like that?
Right. There are always moments where you see the true character of someone.
Yeah. It's always in the small details, isn't it? It's in
one small detail about one character, which was so perfect. And I didn't even realize, of course, but the birds obviously play a big theme. And I didn't even notice the cover. I didn't even notice the birds on the cover until sort of after. And I was like, oh, well, of course there are birds on the cover because they come up all the time in the binoculars and, you know, taking care of wounded birds and all of the things that happen along the way. Why birds? Why did you include all this aviary stuff?
Why indeed? I'm not a bird watcher at all and never was. My granddad was quite a bird watcher, and my dad used to take us bird watching when we were little, because I come from quite a marshy area of England, which is similar to Canvey Island in the book, although I come from the north and the Canvey Island's near London. So you know what? I do know. So my son's father, whose brother suffers from quite severe mental illness, but he suffers from schizophrenia, but he's always loved bird watching, and it's always been a great source of joy for him, you know, resilience. And it just really interested me why that was, what it was about nature that kind of really helped him in his life. And so I think that's where the initial sort of inspiration came from. I wanted to show the resilience of homeless people. I'd worked in a few homeless shelters, and that's what really struck me. And I thought I wanted to give him something like a love of nature to kind of give him this power, this superpower almost. So that's where the bird watching came from, and his kind of love of nature. And I had to research it all because I knew nothing about birds. So, and then the more I researched about birds, the more I found like really magical kind of beautiful things that I wanted to weave into the plot, about the migration. The migration thing, I was kind of really wowed by this fact that the swifts in the book and all migratory birds, they fly thousands and thousands of miles, like they're the size of a crisp packet, and they fly thousands of miles every year to like sometimes the same branch to kind of breed. And I thought, God, that's resilience, all right, and I sort of loved the idea that it was mirroring that, and the fact that the swifts in the book that Stephen's so kind of in love with, they represent security and reliability to him in a world and a childhood that hasn't got any of that, because he can completely rely on these swifts to come back almost to the day every year to Canvey Island where he lives, to nest every spring, and he looks forward to it. And whilst things are going on around him with his stepfather and so on, and life's quite difficult for Stephen as a child, he's got these to rely on. So that was also a factor. So it was kind of like, it was very organic how it came about. I didn't kind of go, I'm going to make it about birds and I'm going to make it fit. It was just like, when I learned about migration and I learned about bird behavior, I just was blown away by it. And I wanted to somehow think about what they could teach us, I suppose, and this idea that we're sharing the planet with something, it's not just us here. And, we're not the most important things on the planet. And yeah, and also because he's homeless, his kind of superpower is that he's a real observer of life. And I thought, what could be more show that than him being a bird watcher? Kind of he's used to observing, and he observes from his place on the street as well, and he can see things that other people can't see about life and human beings. And yeah, so it all kind of tied in.
And wait, say again, so it's it's your stepson who is schizophrenic? Is that what you said?
No, it's so my son's dad, his brother. So my son's uncle.
Your son's uncle. So your brother-in-law or former brother-in-law or whatever.
Yes, yeah. We're not together anymore, but
it's ex-brother-in-law.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Just making sure I had it straight. What was the experience of your ex's, like growing up with? I mean, I know schizophrenia usually shows up around age 18 and everything, but not that you can speak for him, but are there pieces of that relationship that particularly, I mean, one of my favorite books and movies is, the Wally Lamb. I'm like literally losing my mind. I want to say She's Come Undone, but that's the wrong Wally Lamb.
Yeah, I've read that though. That's a
No, it's the one with Mark Ruffalo, and it was directed by Derek Sanfrance, and my mind is like literally.
I need to watch this. I loved She's Come Undone.
No, that was also good. Well, I'll think of it in 2 seconds, or I'm going to look it up. But anyway, it's the same thing where there were twins, and one of them was schizophrenic, and the other was not, and how that ended up evolving. Yeah. So I was just wondering anecdotally if you had
what sort of with my ex.
Yes,
he doesn't have schizophrenia.
I know this much is true. That's what it's called. Sorry, yes, I know this much is true.
He doesn't have schizophrenia, but he has always, been very close to his brother and sort of, looking after him, I guess, caring for him. And he goes bird watching with him, and he's actually a photographer, and he's done a big book called Big Brother, which is all about his relationship. A kind of photojournalism book, which is amazing. And all of this, I think, filtered into my head and became a sort of inspiration for a novel. It was all going on around the same time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, tell me about your writing journey and so you grew up in this marshy part of England, and then what happened? I grew up
in the northwest of England. I always wrote stories, but actually I was more into dancing when I was younger. I was more into performing arts, and that was kind of the direction I was going to go in. But I was always, I think, in a kind of imaginative world. And I used to write my own books, very, very ripping off shamelessly things like Beatrix Potter stories. I was obsessed Potter. And I used to do my own sort of rip-offs of that. So I was always writing stories, and then I did follow the dancing thing for a while, the acting dancing thing, but that didn't work out. And I decided, I went to dance, like a residential dance college, but that didn't work out. And I decided that I wanted to come back and study and go to university, which I did. I did French and English degree. And I think it was at university really that I sort of discovered that maybe I could do this writing thing. I worked at the student newspaper as a features writer, and I just really felt like I'd found my spiritual home. You know, I loved the vibe of it. I loved writing. I found out I could do it. Like a newspaper took an interest in a feature that I'd written, and I think that was my moment where I kind of went, oh, okay, maybe someone like me could make writing as a career. Because I thought, you know, people from little towns in the northwest of England don't become writers. That's like a grand thing to be done. But I think, you know, little things happened where I thought maybe I can do that. And then I was a journalist. I still am a journalist for Marie Claire magazine and Glossy magazines. And then I wrote a column, and that turned into my first novel. And then it went from there. So,
wow.
Yeah.
What do you think is like the future of magazines? I know everything is moving so digital.
Yeah, well, I don't really think there is much future for actual readable magazines. I love magazines. I still love magazines, but you know, so many of them have closed. Even Marie Claire here has folded, and is now only online. In fact, I don't know whether it's even online now. It's such a shame, and I feel so lucky that I worked for magazines in literally the golden era of the late 90s, early 2000s, in Soho in London, and that was like a really exciting time to work in magazines. That was the best time. So it's really sad, but and so I don't know if it's the same in the States, but here, like, a lot of the magazines have kind of merged. So like you've got 3 magazines working on the same features desk, like people writing features for like 3 different magazines. So it's all got sort of smaller and the skeleton staff. And but I still write for magazines myself, and I write for Yahoo and things like that. And so I still do bits of journalism.
Love it. I know. I miss magazines. I feel like it's so hard to find. I mean, I understand the rationale, it'll just be digital, but then once things all just get digital, it's impossible to sort it all out. You know what I mean? Like, I don't sit here and think, okay, I'm in the mood to read a magazine online. Which one should I read?
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Whereas if it comes on my desk, I'll flip through it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's something about holding it, isn't there? And going through the pictures. And I'm with you. In fact, it never occurs to me to look at a magazine online, I have to say. I don't even read the news online. I mean, I listen to the news on my Echo Dot. I just go, play me the news. I want to, so yeah, it's really changing, isn't it?
I read actual hard copy newspapers.
Yes.
I read so much faster with an actual thing than a.
Yeah. No, I do when I've got the time, but I quite like to sort of listen. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, listening is good. We like listening. It helps this podcast.
Yeah.
So what are you working on now?
Well, I need to write a new book. So I'm actually out of contract now. So I wrote the 2 books for Berkeley. So I'm working on a new book to sort of get the next deal. That's how it kind of works in books. You get the deal, or 2-book deal, or 3-book deal, if you're really lucky. So I've got an idea for that, and I'm working on that and doing lots of other sorts of writing, to be honest, as well, to kind of, pay the mortgage and pay the rent. So, but yeah, I'm really excited, actually. I'm really frustrated. I want to get more into my new book and sort of find the time for that, because that's where my real satisfaction comes from. I mean, journalism's great because it's fast and you write it and it's done, and and you get paid, and it's fast moving. But there's nothing like kind of fixing a problem in a novel that's so satisfying.
Yes.
Yeah,
I love that. Do you have anything great that you've read lately?
Yes. What have I read lately? I read a book called Small Pleasures by Claire Chambers, which was an odd little book about a woman who believes that she's had a virgin pregnancy, immaculate conception. Yeah. And it came out quite a long time ago, and I think it might have been, I think it was shortlisted for the Booker or something, but it's a really quirky little book. I liked it a lot. And I mean, I read lots of things, for kind of to quote on them, and people, my peers books and things like that. And I read a book called Attic Child by Lola J, which is a sort of, it deals with some of the history of the sort of Black history. It's set in sort of late 1800s, and it's about that period in Black history, and it's like a double timeline. So some of it's set in the sort of 90s, I think, and some of it in the 1800s, about two children who are both locked in an attic for different reasons. And it's brilliant. It's brilliantly done. I think it's her first epic sort of history, but yeah, watch out for that one. It's fantastic, really rich and so well researched. And other than that, I'm reading an Anne Tyler Patchwork Planner. I've never read that. I know it's a kind of classic, so I'm reading that at the moment. So yeah, I've got really eclectic tastes. I'll kind of read like bits of, women's commercial fiction, and then I'll read some literary stuff, and then I'll read a bit of non-fiction. Yeah. And sometimes I read things that I need for research for my new novel. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, last question. Do you have any advice for aspiring authors?
Yeah. It's not for the faint-hearted. So, yeah, it's not for the faint-hearted. I think my one piece of advice, which is probably what everyone says, is just like, actually write. It's so easy to kind of like go, oh, I'm just going to buy another how to write book, and I'm going to look at this, that there's that podcast, isn't there, and thing, Story Grid, which is great, but I can get lost in that for days and like never write a word. It's all this stuff about, it's all kind of like plotting and description and breakdown and inciting incidents, and it's all the kind of maths of storytelling. But if you're not careful, you can get really bogged down. So my tip would be sit down and try and actually do some words, and then you read all that stuff. It's all helpful, but do some words. Also, at the moment, my tip would be, and other authors kind of disagree with this, but it's just where I am at the moment in my sort of novel writing, is to have a framework before you start, because otherwise it's just hell in my experience. So have a framework, at least know the sort of vague middle, beginning and end. Don't just start something with a kind of idea of a theme that you want to write about. Because to be honest, How to Find Your Way Home, I started it and I was like, I want to write something about a homeless man, and I had the brother and sister relationship, but that's about all I had. Mm-hmm. And so I made it quite difficult for myself, and it went through lots of drafts of trying to sort out the actual story. So my main tip to myself was, I'm never going to write a novel again where I don't know loosely at least what happens.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, Katy, thank you so much. Thanks for spending the time. I really enjoyed getting into the relationship of these two siblings and Stephen, and I loved all their little nicknames for each other, and just the intimacy and the idea of like a brother sort of rebounding, and I mean, not to give anything away, but spending time with people who you've not spent time with
for a long time
in such an intimate way after so long, and what it does to a family, and how families can sort of come in and out. And I really enjoyed it. I got really into it. So
thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye. Hi, I'm Zibby Owens, and you're listening to the award-winning podcast, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. If you like this podcast, you will love my new anthology called Moms Don't Have Time to Have Kids. Check it out, and you'll hear from 49 authors about all sorts of things moms don't have time to do. All the authors have been on this podcast. Also, check out my TikTok @with Zibby and Tracy, my other podcast, Sex Talk with Zibby and Tracy. Check out Moms Don't Have Time to Write on Medium. And of course, my new publishing company called Zibby Books. And now back to our daily author interview site, and a quick hello from some of my kids. Hi.
Hi.
Hello. Enjoy the show.